News 8 special report.
Well, good morning. I'm Jeff Vallon. Governor Malloy has declared a state of emergency here in Connecticut.
For Connecticut is the one
now, the governor is set to deliver his second update of the situation. We go live now to the state's Emergency Operations Center in Hartford.
Unprecedented weather event that will begin tonight and could extend through midday on Tuesday. We are talking about extensive flooding, maybe the worst that we have seen in 70 years. The most significant threat we're facing right now, is the fact that we will be experiencing 4 high tides from the time the storm starts until it ends, with the worst one being late tomorrow night. The amount of water the storm is expected to push into Long Island Sound is far more than the Sound shoreline can handle. The numbers that we are starting to look at right now suggest, in a worst-case scenario, that we will see water surges unlike Connecticut has seen in more than 70 years, referencing the 1938 storm. So that's our first and potentially worst problem, flooding. Our second biggest problem is that we're talking about widespread, extensive, long-lasting power outages. In all likelihood, power will be out for many people for many days. If there is one small piece of good news in the weather forecast, it is that currently it does not appear that there will be a ton of rain associated with this event. But that won't prevent the potentially historic flooding along the waterfront and any rivers or streams that are affected by high tides. There is still a chance that the storm could shift, but as every hour, as every moment passes, that becomes far less likely. Having said that, if we are smart, if we follow instructions, if we all do what we need to do, we can minimize the potential devastating impact the storm will have on our people and on our state. If your local officials have told you to evacuate, I urge you to heed their warnings. I want to be very clear about this. People living in low-lying areas and shoreline towns are taking their lives into their hands if they try to stick the storm out in their homes. Folks, do not do that. It's not worth the risk to yourself or your family or to those who might be called to rescue you. What we can do best to ensure our personal safety and the safety of our family, you might ask? Well, this is the answer. You've been told to evacuate, evacuate. Call 211 or go to www.211ct.org and find out the location of the nearest shelter for you. Make sure everything on your property that is not planted in the dirt is moved inside. If you work in construction, make sure that your sites are secured. Make sure you fill your tubs with water. If you live next door to a senior citizen who lives alone, check on them today while there's still a light out. And please be a good neighbor in supporting that senior citizen. As for what the state can do, we are doing everything possible to prepare for the impact of this storm as it predicts it will likely have. And we're working with cities and towns and major utility companies to make sure they're as ready as they possibly can be. We expect to have more than 800 National Guardsmen in our armories by the time the storm reaches land. The Department of Public Health is working with nursing homes in low-lying areas to determine what assistance they may need and if they should be evacuated. I also want to issue a blanket warning to people who sell commodities that there will be high demand and potentially low supply. Things like gasoline, generators, and bottled water will be in high demand. Be forewarned. If you try to take advantage of Connecticut consumers by engaging in price gouging, you will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law as a result of a bill that I recently signed. Be smart and show some decency. There's one last thing I want to say before I take questions. As bad as the storm is likely to be, and as much damage as it is likely to cause, I have every confidence that the people of Connecticut can and will withstand the next 48 hours. We have been hit before. And we've gotten back up. We're about to get hit again, hit hard, but if we're smart, we will come through this together. With that, I'll take some questions.
Governor Malloy, Connecticut, just wondering how much money you've allotted for all of this storm preparation and potential damage.
All the money we need.
Any specific ballpark on that?
All of it. There's no limitation to our ability to spend money in preparation and on recovery.
And how do you plan to communicate with the people in Connecticut
Well, I'm doing it right now, and we'll continue to do that. We'll use the internet, we'll use radio, we'll use TV. People who don't have a portable radio should get one, and they should make sure that they have substantial battery power to engage in that kind of communication.
How many power crews do you have from out of state, in state now?
The utilities will give you a brief answer to that as soon as I'm done answering questions. Okay.
And are you pleased with the evacuation efforts? Do you feel that they're going okay? Are people responding?
I'm going to have a call at 12 o'clock with the political leaders, first selectmen and mayors of all the waterfront communities to make sure that they're fully cognizant. We've been talking to municipal officials on our municipal calls, but very frequently that does not necessarily involve the first selectman or mayor. So we have taken the extraordinary step of organizing a call at 12 o'clock for all political leaders, chief elected officials of all of the shoreline towns.
Clearly this is going to affect more than just Connecticut. There's a lot of neighboring states who could maybe have spillover into Connecticut. Can you talk to me about the specifics on, have you coordinated with other governors? Have you talked to the federal agencies, the president, anybody?
I'll be speaking with the president at 1:30 this afternoon. We are in communications with the DOTs of all of the adjoining states, so that if a ban goes into place one state, that we all then start the process of issuing those bans, so that no one state has to accept the parking of all of the trucks and that sort of thing that might be affected. We've put a call out. My chief of staff is in communications with the chief of staff of New York State on that issue as well, and particularly on the lower sound or the western portion of the sound issues. We're very concerned about the towns that are closest to New York in Connecticut, very concerned about the towns in New York that are closest to Connecticut as well.
Governor, what's the status of roads and bridges, tunnels?
We'll make those calls at appropriate times. I think that this is the time that people should be making sure that their gas tanks in their cars are full, that they have all the supplies to ride out a bad storm for 36 hours or more, or 48 hours, and that they have what they need to be well for some number of days after that. The amount of damage that could be caused by wind and flooding to the electrical system could potentially be catastrophic.
What about state employees?
We'll make a call at that at our 6 o'clock briefing. Having said that, those essential personnel will obviously be required to report, and we'll make a call on everyone else at the 6 o'clock briefing.
Where will all the evacuees go? I mean, are you thinking they're going to...
Hopefully they go to friends and relatives. That's what our hope is, because we're not in a situation in the short run to house everyone who probably needs to evacuate. So first and foremost, you go to a friend's house, a neighbor's house who's in a non-flood zone, a relative's house. That's what my relatives will be doing, but we are prepared to house individuals who are not in a position where they can make that arrangement.
Are there any specific disasters you look back on in recent history that you guys are learning from and taking lessons from and deploying your strategy?
I think all of our storms, and I've been in public service for a long time. I've ridden out some of these storms in the past as mayor of the city of Stamford. I've had some experience with this as governor as well, and we've learned from all of those. In reference to specific storms, I think for Western Long Island, you begin at a proposition, Western Long Island Sound, of the '92 storm as a benchmark that you could expect at a minimum, and it gets much worse after that. For the rest of the shoreline, I think we're talking about the 1938 storm. So we have advised everyone to use their slush maps, which is for them to gauge a flooding potential for a Category 4 event.
I know some people along the shoreline and maybe even inland from the shoreline might be concerned. How far inland do they need to go to be safe? What can you tell us?
Again, this has to do with streams and rivers that enter into the Sound backing up. We had a conversation today with towns that are along some of those major rivers. I think you have to get your local frame of reference. So think of the worst occurrence that you've ever seen in those environments and then assume it's going to be worse than that. So a tidal effect on rivers will go north or will go further up rivers than we've experienced before, most likely at the third high tide of this event.
Are you anticipating that all schools are going to be closed the next couple of days?
There are certain things that are done on a local basis, evacuations and schools. I suspect that many school systems, most of those along the water at the very least, will be closed tomorrow, but that's a local decision to be made. I'll be conferring, as I said, at 12 o'clock with the local elected chief elected officials, and that probably will come up. But we've urged people to reach out to their superintendents and begin those discussions. One more question, and then I'll turn it over to a very brief briefing by the utilities who are in the midst of their hard work. Anybody else? Yes.
In terms of where you're going to be focusing your resources, in terms of state police, National Guard, anywhere you can tell us where they're going to be positioned at?
We'll have about 800 military available to us. We are making arrangements to move some of those down where they might not otherwise be housed, and specifically the Norwalk Armory will be manned as well, so that we can have access to the lower Sound, Long Island Sound communities. Other than that, the usual locations where they're otherwise massed in the armories. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I think the two utilities will say a few words, and we're back together. I think it's at 6 o'clock. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor, and good morning, everybody. I'm Bill Quinlan. I'm the Senior Vice President for Connecticut Light and Power Company, and I'm happy to be here today giving you an update on our preparedness activities for both the high winds and the flooding that the Governor just referred to. Bottom line is our preparedness activities continue to progress very well. However, we do want to give a caution, which is that while we believe we are prepared, it's important that our customers and others understand that we can't prevent these widespread outages, and they need to plan accordingly. I know the Governor mentioned that, but I just wanted to reinforce that. From a preparedness perspective, our Emergency Operations Center in Berlin, Connecticut is now fully activated. We'll be operating around the clock. We've also activated our 13 storm rooms, which are distributed around the state. And we also have in place our system oversight structure, which is intended to coordinate activities across the Northeast Utilities system, including Massachusetts and New Hampshire. Our priority today is to get our line workers prepared to go to work, and also to onboard the outside resources throughout the course of the day. And those resources will be arriving today from as far as Texas and Washington State. The Governor mentioned we'll give you an update on those foreign resources. Today we expect to have 1,060 line workers available to us. These are in addition to our CLMP resources. We also expect to have approximately 500 tree workers available to us later today. As we move through the course of this event, I think you all know this, but our first priorities are going to be to deal with life-threatening E911 situations and making safe the public roadways. And we're going to be working in very close partnership with the Department of Transportation and the municipalities in that regard. We're also simultaneously going to perform our damage assessment, and then we'll begin to restore critical facilities. So as the Governor indicated, it will likely be several days before we get into bulk restoration. But that's going to be the priority sequence of our activities for the next few days. Our liaison programs, both at a state and municipal level, are fully activated, and we've commenced and are executing a full communications outreach program to both communities and customers across the state. I'm going to introduce.
Sorry to interrupt. Another decision has been made that I wanted to make people aware of. bus service in the state of Connecticut, that is the bus service that we provide, will terminate tonight at 12 o'clock so that equipment can be moved out of areas where it might be flooded so that it might be available for use in other ways, in evacuation and otherwise. So I don't have a call on the Metro North yet or Amtrak. As soon as that information is available to us, we will share it with you, but bus service will end this evening. For the duration of the storm or until we make additional announcements. I'll try to have more transportation information for you at the 6 o'clock briefing, but I wanted to get that out. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jim Torgerson, the President and CEO of UIL Holdings, which is the parent of United Illuminating. One thing I want to mention is we have upgraded our level of concern to what we call level 5. This would mean that we're planning for up to at least in excess of 70% of our customers being out as a result of the storm, mainly because of flooding. We have 7 substations that are along the coastline, and we are very concerned that they will be flooded, and we'll have to de-energize these substations, which will cause outages to more customers. So that'll remain to be seen as to what happens as to how much flooding we do have. We have our EOC is operational. It's actually going to full time at 6 p.m. when people were working in 12-hour shifts starting then. And we have our crews getting ready. We have, at this point, this afternoon or early this evening, we will have 290 linemen available. That compares to 264 we had at the maximum point when Hurricane Irene hit and when we were fully engaged. Now we'll have 170 line clearance crews. These are the tree crews. That's about the same as we had, again, during the height of the maximum when we had during Irene. And service crews will have about 64. And then the other one is damage assessors. These are the people that go out and determine what the damage is. And we'll have 206 of those compared to 140 during Irene. We'll have a total of about 729 people ready to go later today into early tonight, which would be more than we had at the maximum point during Hurricane Irene. We also have a request in for another 600 linemen and 100 tree clearance people. So we are ready for the storm. Hopefully it won't be as bad as we're hearing, but we are preparing for the worst, and the worst scenario we have a plan for is now being put in operation by our people. Again, I want to emphasize that if you see crews out there, please let them do their job and don't interfere with their work. And also, if you see wires down, do not touch them. Don't go near them. Let our people handle that. And with that, I think Mr. Quinlan and I would be happy to answer questions.
Can you compare, you were comparing sort of your forces compared to Irene. How do these numbers compare to Irene's numbers and what you're talking about?
Yeah, so first, I think Tropical Storm Irene, we peaked at about 1,400 line crews in Connecticut, and I will have to double check that number, but I think that's a good approximation, 1,400 line crews, which approximates 2,800 line workers. Our target is 2,000 foreign line workers that we hope to bring in and hope to achieve that in relatively short order. Against that, we have 1,060 available to us tonight.
So will the balance be coming in tomorrow? Or
Yeah.
tonight, or do you know when?
So we have several hundred additional line workers confirmed for arrival tomorrow and in subsequent days. And similar to United Illuminating, we continue to seek additional resources from the industry. We have an open request for approximately 750 line workers.
NBC Connecticut, I'm
Yeah.
just wondering,
Morning.
where are all these crews going to come from since the entire Mid-Atlantic is going to be affected by the storms? You mentioned, I believe, earlier Washington State and Texas, but
Yes.
where else?
Yeah, so the majority of these crews are coming from the Midwest states. We've got large influx of resources from the Midwest. We have reached as far as the West Coast to solicit crews, both crews who are going to drive cross-country and crews that are going to fly from Seattle, Washington.
Yeah, we actually have crews that are coming from Georgia and Alabama from the southeast, and I'm sure there'll be more coming from the Midwest as well. We've seen that are people from San Diego, San Francisco, Seattle are all volunteering to come, but it's going to take them a number of days to even get here, probably like 5. So.
And what about the equipment? Obviously, every crew is going to need a lot of equipment to deliver the services.
Typically, the crews bring their own equipment. They drive their own trucks, bring their equipment with them, because we don't have excess equipment just sitting around. We have some, but not enough to supply all these. So the way the mutual assistance works is people bring their own trucks, they bring their own supplies as much as we can. We make sure we house them, feed them, and provide safety training for them, but they bring their own equipment.
Yeah. And for the crews that we are flying in, they're obviously not bringing their equipment. So we do have a pool of available vehicles and tools here ready for their use. We also have arranged through local contractors an additional fleet available for those line workers who we are flying in. Yes?
Based on what you're seeing now from this storm, when do you think that those crews will actually be able to get out there and start making repairs if there are outages?
Well, what will happen, well, the storm's going to have to pass generally, because we can't put the linemen up in the bucket trucks with the winds in excess of 40 miles an hour. It's just too dangerous. You know, we can't risk our people. So once the storm passed, the winds died down a little bit, then we got to get out and assess what's going on. And we're going to be putting a crew, a line crew and a tree crew in every town, all 17 towns we service. That'll help the town, working with the Public Works Department, to clear the roads, do whatever they need to do. We've set up priorities within each town, worked with them. They gave us their top 10 priorities. We'll work to do that with them. But then as soon as we can get the roads clear, then we'll start restoring. We'll start restoring as quickly as we can, but it has to be safe conditions before we're going to get the crews out there. They'll do what they can on the ground, but, you know, repairing the lines in the air, you can't get the line trucks up and put the booms up until it's safe. So it'll take a few days to get.
Yeah, is there any indication of how long that may be based on what we're seeing from this?
Well, we don't know what's going to happen with the storm, the amount of damage that's going to occur. We had to wait and see. Then we got to go out and assess. I mean, it doesn't do us any good to start putting things back together until we can actually assess what damage has been done. And you have to work from the substation going out, because work along the main lines, put those all back together first and get things. But you got to know what happened. And so we have to get out, look, assess, do our engineering, figure out what needs to be done. We can do that pretty quickly, but it typically takes 24 to 40 hours to actually assess the entire system and figure out what's happened. And in the meantime, we'll be working with the towns.
And for CL&P, we will have a contingent of workers in the field this evening doing the work that they can do in partnership with the towns. And that's going to be predominantly dealing with E911 calls and clearing roads where it's safe to do so. And just as soon as the winds subside below that 40 mile per hour level, we'll be able to start putting buckets in the air. We expect that to occur Tuesday morning based upon current projections.
Do you have any advice for everyone watching at home on whether or not they should call CL&P and how they should assess their own damage? Any words of caution?
So I would encourage, as always, if you experience a power outage, to call that in immediately. It's very important that we are aware of that. Obviously, if there are downed wires, as Mr. Torgerson indicated, stay clear of those and be certain to contact CL&P immediately so we could attend to those high priority situations. And if you do have an emergency generator, I understand there are many citizens across the state who have installed emergency generation. Let's ensure that it's done safely by a licensed electrician to prevent the public health and safety risk that creates for our workers and first responders if it's not installed correctly. Those would be my words of advice.
So do you think people, I think in terms of how long people should be prepared for outages, do you think, are you talking like a week or longer? Or?
I don't even think we can estimate it right now. We got to see what damage is done, how many people are out. I would hesitate to even put an estimate out today. I really don't know. Just as the governor said, it's going to be a while. So, and I don't know what a while is yet. Okay. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate you coming.
Okay, and in the last roughly half an hour, we've heard from a few people, obviously Governor Daniel Malloy and a couple of utilities executives. Now, essentially, in summarizing this, the governor is talking about the main concerns being flooding, widespread, extensive, and long-lasting power outages, And he's also, of course, telling people to heed any evacuation mandates which may come in your local area. He says that there's a lot of manpower, 800 National Guardsmen deployed at the armories throughout the state, that all the money, there is no cap on how much will be deployed to take care of the problems here. He says he will make the appropriate calls regarding roads, bridges, and tunnels as needed, and when the time comes. Essential personnel at the state level are expected to serve. It's a wait-and-see situation for others. Now, as far as school closures go, he emphasized that that is a local decision, and to get your information locally from your town or the superintendent, whoever's appropriate in your town. Now, he also mentioned that bus service, any bus service provided by the state, will be closing and ending tonight at midnight. As far as Metro North and Amtrak service, right now that is also on a wait-and-see basis. Now, again, we also did hear from Bill Quinlan with CL&P, as well as Jim Tarterson with United Illuminating, who both spoke quite a bit about the manpower that they are the personnel that they have ready to deploy, as well as the ones that they are bringing in, foreign workers, as they say, which means from out of state, many of whom are coming from the Midwest and even as far as the West Coast. The numbers are definitely quite enhanced in terms of comparison to the Tropical Storm Irene situation of about 14 months ago. They did emphasize that as far as managing expectations, they really only have so much to go on here because they have to wait and see what happens, how much damage there is. And of course, that even fixing downed power lines, for example, is going to require first a clearing of roads, whatever roads may be blocked to get to those breakdowns, assessing the damage, and then deploying the crews and equipment to those. And they are emphasizing that you do not touch downed power lines. If you see something like that, or if you have an emergency, to contact the power company. But also, if it's a life-threatening emergency, that you, of course, want to contact your local fire and/or police departments. So again, in summation, we're talking about the governor giving us some ideas of what to expect. What he and by the way, all of the gentlemen we heard from expressed some level of satisfaction, or at least optimism, about the preparation that is in place, especially given in the light of what happened with Tropical Storm Irene just barely more than a year ago. So that essentially is what we've been hearing in the last half an hour at this press conference. And again, the governor said he'll be talking with the president and talking with shoreline municipalities over the next several hours. So you can imagine we'll be hearing and having a lot more to report about this as we go on. And of course, you can stay with News 8 as we go along. But now we've heard from all of them, let's hear from Mr. Gil Simmons about what's going to be happening with Sandy.
Well, Jeff, as we were talking about in the studio, this is something you don't want to see already. Here we are, midday on Sunday, and this is what is typically a dry parking lot in the Stratford area, right on the edge of the Housatonic, and the water is covering a good chunk of this parking lot. As a matter of fact, it was all the way up to this area over here. The tide now going out slowly, so we are already getting flooding from a tide that's pushed higher from the wind, and also that full moon phase coming up tomorrow will continue to drive the water higher. Developments since we last chatted this morning. I do think that with the speed of this thing coming up from the south, making that turn with the new forecast track, we are looking at a higher threat now of the high tide cycle midday tomorrow. So that happens around 10 a.m. through about noon tomorrow. That could be a devastating tide cycle from New London right to Greenwich. That includes Milford, Bridgeport, all of the shoreline, Cozy Beach, East Haven, Westbrook, Madison, you name it, even Old Saybrook. And again, the National Hurricane Center keeping with their thoughts here in their forecast of making that left-hand turn. But again, we are going to be on the windiest side of this whole scenario, so high wind warnings up for the entire state, and the real severity will be the level of coastal flooding, where we are looking at the most severe being late morning and around noon tomorrow, and number 2, with the latest forecast graphs, have the second one almost as high, and that happens about midnight, late Monday night into Tuesday morning. I posted a whole article on WXEdge.com, and you can check out the latest tide levels yourself, couple of updating graphs on there. Shoreline residents, I have to tell you, these are some of the highest water levels that I've seen compared to what has happened in the past to what we are forecasting. So our threat level at the shoreline, again, we are over here in the extreme category for flooding, for tree damage, where there are more leaves on the trees close to the shoreline and more winds expected, and power as well. You heard from the gentleman about, hey, we have to assess after this, and then it's a matter of how long will the 30 to 40 mile per hour winds go. They may go through a good chunk of Tuesday before they can get those buckets back up in the air. Northern, central Connecticut, not forgetting about you, Waterbury, Torrington, Hartford, Willimantic, Colchester, up through Woodstock, and even Enfield. Flooding, not a threat for you because we are looking at lower rain amounts. The heaviest rain will be D.C., New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, down into Virginia as well. But tree issues, you're way over here in just about to the extreme category, and power issues, you are in the extreme category. There's still time to prepare, folks, and I'm really asking you to take this seriously. The main outer bands are still kind of down here, although we are getting some wind off the ocean now moving across Connecticut. This is nothing from how it will ramp up tonight, and I really think tomorrow morning. For those of you emailing in, tweeting, Facebooking, how about when I go to work tomorrow morning? Does not look like a wise idea at all. These are the wind gusts that I'm expecting lunchtime tomorrow into tomorrow night. And if you're in this red zone, this is the 95 corridor. This is up through about North Haven and Hamden. This is eastbound up into sections of the Route 2 corridor there, Gilman over to Norwich. I think you're looking at the risk of 90 mile per hour gusts. Just inland, hey, what's really the difference here? Not a whole heck of a lot, but 80 miles per hour Danbury, up through Meriden, south side of Hartford, up through Plainfield, all the way to Putnam. Then you get up just north of Hartford to Enfield to Torrington, let's say Litchfield, Salisbury, down to about Kent and even New Milford, around 70 miles per hour. Now, this may shift north or south depending on how this whole thing unfolds. But folks, I'll really reach out to you in any kind of mobile home areas. If you're in this kind of red zone, please try to call or arrange to stay with friends or family or your local evacuation area, because we're going to have some incredible winds out of the east, northeast, and then eventually later tomorrow night into Tuesday morning, just like a saw blade coming right from the southeast. So those are all bad directions, especially for our friends at the immediate shoreline and those of you that are just getting back on your feet from Irene last August. And I'll tell you this, folks, the latest tide forecasts are showing anywhere from 2 to 6 feet now above where that Irene level was. I don't want you to concern yourselves with what's the number, what's this and that. I want you to think about Irene's level with the waves and the water, and then 4 to 6 feet higher. That means it could go much further inland. That's what we're talking about. That's what we're concerned about. Storm Team 8 fully staffed. We've got your back from start to finish through this. If you lose power, we are going to stream every update that we do online. So if you have your cell phone charged, if you have your laptop charged, you will be able to follow our minute-by-minute coverage here. It's a good idea, though, to find that link today at WTNH.com. Save that so you're ready to go. And also WXEdge.com as well. We'll be updating information as often as we can right through the duration of this storm. Again, Jeff, as I go back to you, this is serious business, and we hold our forecast firm here with big impacts statewide. Again, the highest threat, that coastal flood at high tide. And then again, the winds statewide strongest south and then east with the wind gusts. I'll send it over to you.
All right, Gil, yeah, and noticing too that you're talking about now the midday high tide tomorrow being a huge concern. We heard the governor talking about his concerns about the late evening tomorrow. So certainly a less and less optimistic scenario as we look ahead at this flooding footprint and everything else that comes with this storm as it comes close. And of course, we'll keep on tracking Sandy as she gets closer to Connecticut. So keep it tuned to News 8 and WTNH.com. Like you heard Gil say, it is available either online and also on your smartphone if you have the free app. That is News.